Welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown, the podcast where we watch scary movies so you don't have to.
From award-winning to completely unknown, we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Solange Hummel.
Now, warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously as we take these movies seriously. Ring, 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 ring.
Hello?
This is a dead child calling you.
I'm sorry to be laughing at you, dead child. That's probably a little rude.
Whatever, I don't remember anything anyway. I don't know who I am.
Why are you calling me on this black phone from 2022?
Because I'm going to mysteriously help you escape from this bad guy by some sort of weird time travel thing that's not really time travel. It doesn't make any sense.
Wow. This podcast is 10 seconds in and it's all spoilers to the brim. Just filled up.
Anyone who listens to our podcast knows that they should watch the movie first if they intend to watch the movie.
It says that right in the intro.
It really does.
So at the end, the grabber gets beaten up.
He does. By Finn, or Finney, who it's very overtly expressed that he is fully capable of being a fighter, but he is just too gentle.
He's just a gentle giant.
It was like his character was like the male equivalent of the Mary Sue. Like a Mary Sue is a very specific female character that is just so stereotypical in how she does things, right? And
well, she's perfect.
Right, but perfect and like in very specific ways, right? Like knows how to do things that she shouldn't know how to do and things like that, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Capable of being the heroine without any practice. I always kind of feel like a Mary Sue also tends to have that like girl next door, not like other girls kind of thing going for her.
I think that's true. Is he not like other boys?
He's not like other boys. Like he's not a bully like the other boys. He doesn't fight. What does his friend say? He doesn't throw a punch, but he knows how to take a punch. Mm-hmm. But underneath it all, he's got all that courage and strength and whatever. And so when it really is needed, it all comes out of him and he is able to defeat a whole grown serial killer man with a phone.
Well, I was going to say with the help of several dead kids.
Well, there's that, but they weren't doing anything.
They gave him all the tips. It was like reading a strategy guide.
I don't know. He just seemed to be too perfect.
Yeah, I guess I see that. I just think it was a weird story because like one of my notes was just that this kid just has a ton of support. He's got a psychic sister who's out there looking for him. The cops are desperately trying to find him, which I guess is normal.
The cops are so desperate that they're just fully on board with this 10-year-old girl who's like, I have magic dreams.
They're
and
not
like,
just
tell
on
us
board.
about it.
They're like, please, tell us about your dreams. We've got to know everything about your dreams so we can find this kid.
I don't think they knew, I don't think they were quite like that at first. I think they thought she actually knew something or had seen something. But then they were just like, oh, your dreams has to go to 7741. Let's do it.
Let's get going.
Let's go.
But yeah, he didn't have to be like a super great talented person because he had so many people just helping him out on this little journey. He almost got away in the middle.
So here is a thought that I had a little while ago and then just suddenly re-had because I had forgotten it. Because while I was watching this movie, I was super annoyed by the fact that he was getting these phone calls from these dead kids who had been in this room before him. And they were telling him, like, oh, do this, do that. No, you should know this piece of information. Like, they were telling him all the things he needed to know to get out.
Yeah.
And I was super annoyed because if the previous dead kid had pulled the cord out from under the wall and used it to do whatever, why is the cord still under the wall?
It was mysterious.
So I realized it was all in his head. These were the guys that he knew, the other kids that he knew, and he was making up, like, in his brain, his super smart brain was telling him to find these things around the place and do these things.
Okay, that's a good thought, and I think that's a fun interpretation, except when it comes to breaking the wall down, which didn't seem physically possible to me, but he definitely did it, hammered through that concrete wall with the top of a toilet lid, which feels like it would have shattered.
I know, that porcelain would have fallen apart immediately. I don't know.
Anyway, he hammered through there to get into a fridge in a storage room that he was told was there, and it was.
And the back of that fridge was a thin piece of metal that was just screwed on, and if you took that thin piece of metal off, you were in the fridge. So that was a really inefficient fridge.
It's very inefficient. Well, it's meant to be placed right up against a wall, so the
right
wall
up against a
helps
concrete
insulate
wall.
It. Yeah.
Yeah, I see your point, but that piece was also the piece where I was like, this didn't happen before. This grabber guy didn't have a teenage boy in here a few weeks back who smashed up the toilet, smashed through the wall, disassembled the refrigerator, etc. And then when he's getting ready to get his next kid in there, he put another toilet in. He
fixed the wall.
Left the fridge exactly where it was.
Yeah.
Patched up the wall. Neither scenario makes any sense.
That whole thing about smashing the wall apart, and when it's a concrete wall, is just... I know concrete's brittle, and you can definitely, get pieces of it out, but...
You know what's more brittle than concrete?
Porcelain.
Porcelain.
Yeah. But it's like... Again, Doctor Who has given an ironic response to this movie on the same night we watched it. In this case, Doctor Who went and had to punch his way through something that's 400 times harder than diamond.
And it took him a billion years.
It took him several billion, I think. And it just had to punch one time after another. That's how you get through a concrete wall, is you're in jail for 10 years
right.
and you're scraping a little bit at a time.
Yeah.
He didn't do that in an afternoon.
No, he didn't do any of it in an afternoon. And also, why was this guy kidnapping kids and then just leaving them unsupervised to run around in his basement and like take it apart and find all the things?
Yeah, and they're not chained up or anything. They're just freewheeling.
Yeah, it didn't make a lot of sense. And I mean, I guess there was the explanation that the grabber was upstairs at the top of the stairs, eagerly awaiting the kid trying to escape so that he could punish him for being a naughty boy.
Mm-hmm. That was part of his game.
So I guess like he wanted them to be doing things, but also he didn't come down and check. How did he not know that there was a hole in the hallway under that tarp? It clearly wasn't a hallway that he was walking on to come down and bring the kid food.
No.
Why was there a whole extra hallway for this kid to run around in?
No, the hallway where the hole was like, it was part of the room the kid was in. It was a big rectangular room, and then it had that skinny hallway-shaped piece that went off to the toilet. It was like a bathroom, but with no door. That's where he dug up, was in the... Right in front of the toilet is what he dug up.
I see. And he managed to dig a, 4-foot hole.
It was huge. Yeah.
Because the guy fell in it and hurt his ankle on the grate that he managed to pull off the wall, which the guy never noticed that either, apparently.
True, he did not notice that the grating was gone from the window.
The whole thing, I'm like, this is the most ineffective serial killer kidnapper ever. Like, he just wasn't scary.
Yeah.
Because he didn't do anything.
Well, I mean, that was part of the story, though, was that he normally, like you said, he waits for them when they naughtily... Is naughtily a word?
Naughtily?
When they naughtily try to escape, he beats them until they're unconscious and then kills them later.
Yeah.
And that was kind of how Finney was a special boy, is that he never was doing the naughty thing, which was actually because the ghost kids were telling him what to do.
Okay, I still think the ghost kids didn't really exist. Which brings us to the part of this movie that I don't want to say I liked it, but that I thought was interesting and that I thought was well done. Like, I liked the way it worked in the story. I think what saved Finn is that he had been living in a household with his abusive, alcoholic, enraged monster of a father. And so he knew how to, like, tiptoe around someone who was sleeping in the middle of a room and he wasn't supposed to disturb them, and he knew how to take a punch, and like, the grabber's got his belt and he wants to beat him with it, and that's not, I mean, I'm not saying that Finn like wanted to get hit by the belt or anything, but he knew he could survive that. I don't think he had the same like fear of the things that the grabber did, and he also knew how to not make an irrational, angry adult human male angry. Like, he had been trained for this.
He was prepared. It's like it's a cross between Split and Signs.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned Split, because much like how I was not thrilled with the message of Split, I don't love that the message of this that I'm presenting for this movie is like, it's okay that you have an alcoholic father who abuses you. It's just making you stronger for the real world.
Yeah,
I don't love that.
Able to handle serial killers.
Yeah.
It feels like the movie didn't make a lot of that connection, showing, you know, that he had these skills because of this. But I can see how it's there.
It spent so much time talking about and showing what a monster his dad was, that like, in comparison, and I have to think, okay, there are two options. Either Joe Hill doesn't understand how to build tension and work toward a climax of a story, or it was intentionally set up that his dad was so much scarier than the grabber. Like, when you think about just watching the scenes, I mean, we see horrible things that his dad does. And the grabber, I mean, at the end, he gets nasty, but really, like, he is super mellow compared to what his dad is.
He keeps trying to come off as very harmless. That's kind of his thing. So, yeah. I see what you're saying.
I don't know. I thought that part was interesting. And I noticed, like, I saw a lot of parallels between how Joe Hill writes and how Stephen King writes in that sort of thing. Like, there are certain things where I was like, this is either because he read a lot of his dad's books or because there's some kind of genetic predisposition to focusing on coming of age stories and abusive fathers and, you know, like certain other things that King writes about a lot.
And the 70s nostalgia and...
Right. Well, right. It was definitely like, I'm going to set this story in the era of my youth, of my own coming of age.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly common thing for writers to do, especially white male writers. But
this movie really especially was doing that, like, aggressively. Like, it wasn't just set in the 70s. It was like Stranger Things, but 10 years earlier. You know, it had all the plucky kids and even the kind of Stranger Things-y music and like the bullies attacking them and stuff. Like, it felt like it.
It definitely felt like it in that, all of that stuff, for sure. And Gwen riding her bike around, that feels like it. Bill, what's his name with his bike, Hi-Ho Silver.
Well, and then she goes out in her little Georgie outfit in the rain.
Well, and I don't know if, like, I wonder if that was in the story or if that was like when they made the movie, they're like, we're going to throw this little homage to Stephen King in there.
Yeah, probably.
As Joe Hill is saying, you know, I changed my last name for a reason.
Yes, and Joe Hill wrote the story that this movie is based on.
Yes. The other big, like, plot hole that I found was Finn is like the 5th kid to go missing.
Something like that.
In what is shown to be a very small town. Like, it made me feel like it was the size of the town I grew up in, we had like less than 100 kids in our graduating class. Like,
Was it because they all got taken?
so it felt like a very small town. 5 kids have gone missing. And the cops are just like, I don't know. Even though there's a weirdo part-time magician who has black balloons as part of his act and drives a creepy black van around town. And even in a town the size of what we live in now, which is not a town, it's a city.
Yeah.
You would know about this dude, and he'd be the first person you'd be asking, like, where were you when these kids disappeared?
Maybe he had good answers. He's a smart guy.
Is he, though?
I don't know.
So, I don't know. I don't understand why this guy was able to just drive around town stealing kids in broad daylight.
Yeah.
And
His brother
was
is a
suspicious.
smart guy, though. He was investigating the crime. And by the very end, he had figured out, well, he had a theory, and he went and looked in the basement, and he found Finn.
Yeah. How did all of that happen? In the same house that this brother was living in? Like, Finn walked through the kitchen, and how does his brother's not curious about the padlock on the front door?
Well, that is the weirdest part. Okay, padlock on the front door. When the cops showed up, there was no padlock. He would just open the door, and they came in, and he was just hanging out there.
Maybe I'm confused about which house. So, because he had 2 houses.
Which is an issue for me.
Which house did they live in? They were right across the street from each other. Which house did the brothers live in? The house with the dead bodies or the house with the live kidnapped bodies?
Okay, I think they made it clear because they said an empty house where he put the bodies. So I believe that the grabber and his brother both lived in the house where he was keeping the kid, which is crazy. Put the kid in the empty house.
Right? Put the bodies in the house your brother lives in. He doesn't go in the basement. It's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole geography of this house didn't make any sense because things were like, I don't know, like Finn would come up from the basement and that's where the grabber was waiting for him to beat him. Was that the upstairs kitchen or was there another floor above that? Because Max was always like, oh, my brother's down there. I don't know what he's up to. Like it seemed like they were on 2 separate levels, but it also seemed like that was above ground. So
yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. The landscape of the house doesn't make any sense.
And maybe the big twist that we didn't get was that they are living in separate houses. But then
that's not what they said, though.
Yeah, and there was a bit where like his brother's like, "Hey, what's going on with all this noise?" And he yells up at him, "Oh, it's just the dog barking. He's upset."
See, I wasn't looking at the screen when that happened. Was he yelling from the kitchen or from the basement?
I think he was on the stairs. I don't know. So it's not good.
Also, his brother at no point was curious about why they had a hellhound living in their house.
Yeah.
I mean, that dog looked CGI'd. It was so...
It was a scary dog.
Intense. I don't know.
But
I don't know.
then, okay, we are discussing the fact that they had 2 houses. Why? I mean, great and all. Some people have 2 houses. Sometimes they're right across the street from each other. Sure. But what purpose did that serve in the story? Because there was a lot of confusion about it at the very end of the movie, but none of it was like, ooh, surprise mislead.
It was a surprise mislead, though, because the houses looked identical. And so Gwen was having her dreams where she saw the house. So I think that was the whole idea, was that, like, she saw the number because the one dead kid came to her in a dream and beat some guys up at a grocery store and then carved the street number into somebody's arm, which was a whole weird situation. So she finds that house and she's like, this is the house. This is what it looks like. And the cops come and they're like, nope, there's nobody here. And that was supposed to be like where is he? Because we were supposed to think he was in that house, but that was the house with the dead kids.
Yeah, that's the problem, is because they went in there on her mystical urging.
Yeah, they just busted down the door.
Yeah, completely.
Went into an empty house with I assume, no warrant.
They go in, And pretty quickly they discover, hey, there's a basement down here, and they go and look and they find that these are where the bodies are. So yes, they didn't find him, but he was getting out anyway, so it's like the story is missing that piece.
I think they didn't find him, but he had to get out anyway on his own because that was the whole point of the story, was
Sure.
that, Magic Finn, can take care of himself, even though he has not done that at all at any point in his life. He's able to stand up for himself. So they couldn't rescue him. He had to do it himself. He had to kill somebody in order for this story to work. But they had to be... I think in order to make the tension of the story work, you had to think that they had to save him and that they were gonna be too late because
But you
they
wouldn't
went to the
think
wrong
that
house.
because the houses looked the same. We were fooled, so we didn't think they were too late until it was too late and Finn was already out.
Well, no, there was a moment where if I hadn't known that Finn had already killed the grabber, and I don't actually remember how it all came out, but when they get there and they're like, oh, there's just bodies here in the basement, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not the basement that he's in. I thought this was the house. And you think maybe they're going to be too late because they're not going to find the house. Somehow all of this information we've been getting has just been about the dead kids and not about him. And you don't know that the other house is right across the street until after that.
Yeah.
And his sister is looking and he comes out of the door. She didn't even realize. How was she looking at the house across the street and not going, that house looks just like the one in my dream too?
Yeah. It was funny to me because there were a couple scenes where she and sometimes her dad were going around the neighborhood, looking for the house that she said she had seen in her dreams. Mm-hmm. And before that point, I had seen the street number on it. I couldn't read it, but it was there. She had a vision of the front of the house. It had a street number on it. And I'm like, okay, she's a little kid. She's looking around at random. Her dad knows that the numbers go up and down. He knows where to look to find this house.
Right. Get up, bust out a map, man.
But apparently she didn't actually know what the street number was.
I guess not.
She can't read numbers.
Except that the cops were at that house because they talked to the brother. They talked to Max.
I know.
And they were like, he was so obnoxious about wanting to help them that they were like, okay, never mind, man. We're just going to go.
Yeah.
Which, when I thought that he and his brother were the same person, I thought that was very clever of him.
Yeah, that was interesting.
To be so helpful that the cops are just like, no. Because that must have been before they knew about how serial killers tend to like to insert themselves in the investigation.
Indeed.
Because that's why I thought they were the
Unsubs.
same. Yes. That's why I thought they were the same. I was like, oh, this is classic unsub behavior.
It is indeed. But all of that stuff, the multiple houses, the multiple brothers, where each one lived, it was all this extra confusion that didn't feel warranted. It wasn't it never factored into Finney's escape situation at all. Like you said, he had at least knocked the grabber unconscious before he came up. Not sure if he's dead or not, but Finney got himself out of that house without the help of any cops or anybody. So he was fine. He could have walked home at that point, but they found him. And it was why did we do all of that stuff when it was just not a part of the conflict?
Yeah. So, wait, did the grabber die? Because
He did.
Finn has a great arm and he
that's right.
snaps his neck with it.
Yeah, which
after
is wow.
all the dead kids. So, another interesting part of it was that the phone really did ring because the grabber also heard it ring.
Well, they said before that he would hear it ring throughout.
Yes.
Even before Finn got there.
And that that it really rings and he's like, I don't know, I think it's static electricity or something. But that the other kids said that they couldn't hear the ringing.
Yeah.
So there's this interesting piece about how Finn and the grabber have this thing in common. And so then when Finn has broken the grabber's ankle and has beat him with the phone receiver and had tied a cord around his neck and stuff like that.
The phone cord.
Yeah. Then the phone is ringing and he like holds the phone to his head and is like, "It's for you." And then all the dead kids are saying all their lines.
That's another one. I hate to keep doing it, but like, so clever bit was that each of the kids almost had a line that they had previously said to Finn
That worked
in this scenario, talking to the grabber. One was like, "This is the day you die," or something. And it made sense when he was talking to Finn, and now it was like, haha, it was like, gotcha for the grabber. First of all, one or two of them didn't make sense for the grabber. They were just like, nah, whatever. And second of all, they weren't that connected like they should have been. Like, it should have been perfect. That wouldn't have been hard to write. You know, just like, oh, this perfect line from them to him. There were a couple of them that were, but then, like, you know, his arm is mint, whatever. It was weird.
Well, it was because, I mean, I kind of liked that because Bruce said your arm is mint after a game, and then that was how he knew that it was Bruce. Bruce didn't know who he was because apparently when you die, you forget your name.
Yeah.
But he said, you know, we met once, your arm was mint, and he was like, oh, I know who you are. And then saying your arm is mint right before he uses his arm to break his neck.
What bothered me about that was he didn't say the exact words he said to Finn. He said, you know, he used different pronouns because he was talking to the grabber about Finn.
Well, so did Robin, because Robin,
That's
when
annoying.
he was talking to Finn, was like, I can't get revenge, so you're gonna do it for me. And then when he was talking to the grabber, he was like, I can't get revenge, so Finn's gonna do it for me.
Yeah, and
which
that bothered me.
all feeds into the whole, like, this was all happening in Finn's mind. He, like, these ghosts didn't exist. They were just...
Yeah.
It was like the girl who loved Tom Gordon, right? Like, she's lost in the mountains and she's...
Talking to Tom Gordon.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. And I like that, but I didn't like the writing of it. Like, they should have had exact, like, not even, they shouldn't have even said it another time. They should have replayed the exact sound that had been in the earlier conversation.
I mean, I think overall our main complaint is the writing of it, which is kind of sad for Joe Hill. So I do want to say, despite the fact that I just spent this whole episode trashing on this story, I found it entertaining. I enjoyed watching it. It was a mellow horror. It had a story. It had some plot holes. But honestly, it's one of those movies where if you just don't think about it too hard, it looks like it holds together. It's just when you start going, wait, there's this one little thread here, and you start pulling at it, and then pretty soon the whole thing is unraveled on the floor. So if you watch it and you're just like, I'm going to suspend disbelief and I'm just going to enjoy this story as it's presented to me, it's really fun. I thought it was really fun. That being said, when there's a story that you have to, like, stand way, way back from so that you don't notice all the loose ends that you aren't supposed to pull, like, that's kind of a problem with the writing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I'm not saying I could have done any better, but Joe Hill is no Stephen King.
I mean, maybe his story is perfect because this is a screenplay based on his story.
That is very possible, too.
For all we know.
That is very possible. So, I mean, I guess that's pretty much all I have to say for the review part is, despite the fact that I complained about it, maybe because it had so many things for me to, like, pick at and talk about and discuss, I enjoyed it. I liked this movie. I'm glad I watched it. I would recommend it to other people who like kind of milder horror, although you should be aware that there is, like, some serious child abuse in it.
Yeah.
So I am going to give this movie 3.5 frowny masks out of 5, and it's a strong 3.5.
That's pretty strong considering the rampaging rants of the
I
first
know.
part of this podcast.
I know. But it was, I don't know, I guess there were a lot of things, but none of them made me not enjoy watching the movie. They just made it more fun to talk about it afterwards.
Very positive. I actually have pretty similar feelings. I just want to note that throughout the movie, you and I were talking out loud like we do with some movies. Because so much in this movie was confusing and poorly written and a hole. Like the fact that he dug his way through a wall and dug a 20-foot trench in the floor and all of that stuff. And oh my gosh, the fact that this room had reset itself somehow. Like the kid calls him up and goes, I dug this trench down into the floor, and so, go dig there. And like, maybe you did, but he completely replaced it.
But then he put the same broken tile back on so that
tiles.
You can do the same thing that I did. And he's not going to check.
He didn't put new tiles down.
He didn't learn anything.
It's super weird. And the other kid stole the cable from under the wall over there, but then apparently shoved it right back in. I don't have any idea what they intended with that, and that's the thing with the movie, is that makes it worse than a lot of other things, is that it had those huge gaps to where I can't even figure out what they meant to do.
Yeah.
It's really weird. But that being said, it looks and feels like a very good movie. Like, it makes you feel like it's going well, as long as you don't pay attention to those things, like you said. Except it's hard to pull your head away from it far enough.
Oh, also, there's the fact that he only actually won against the grabber because the grabber apparently is incapable of having both the top and the bottom of his face uncovered at the same time.
Yes.
Because the grabber had him. He was done for, and he took the grabber's mask off, and that stopped him in his tracks. Like, he let go of Finn, he grabbed his face. I'm like, good thing he was face never nude, because
Yes,
that was what saved Finn.
And I'm okay with that, because that was like him being crazy, which we knew. It was kind of cool. Like, we had seen him only in these masks and in various arrangements of them.
Yeah.
And so I like the idea that, ripping it off freaked him out. So I was cool with that. And that speaks to the end of it, which is, I mentioned Signs earlier. It's got that same idea as Signs, where each of the things the boys told him, they were intended to get him to escape, but it turned out each one of the things he had to do to try those different escapes was useful in defeating the grabber at the end, which was cool. That was a good concept, but again, full of lots of holes. And that's kind of the whole movie. It was a good idea. It was well executed, but it was full of holes, immensely. And for that, I give it 3 frowny face masks out of 5.
Okay.
Because I did enjoy it, and I thought it was good, but I still ended up angry throughout with these issues.
Okay, I totally forgot the thing that made me the most angry at the end.
Oh, let's get more angry.
Okay, so the whole point of the story is that Finn finds his confidence, finds his self-worth, whatever, defends himself, right? That's the whole point of the story. And it is so clearly established throughout the whole thing that the thing he really needs to defeat is his abusive father, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. The whole kidnapping is just a metaphor for what he's dealing with in his real life. So he defeats the kidnapper, he kills the kidnapper with his bare hands.
Well, he used a phone.
And his arm.
Yeah.
And then he gets out of the house, and the dad finally shows up, and the 2 kids are in the ambulance, and the dad shows up, and all that happens is that the dad begs their forgiveness on bended knee, and the kids just kind of look at him. And I'm like, that was the most anticlimactic climax, because that was, I know it wasn't the climax of the story, but it was so anticlimactic to have him not have to confront. I needed him to have a moment where he could say, we're not doing this anymore. This is over. Like, you don't get to do this anymore. And he didn't get that. There was no confrontation. His dad apparently just was all better now.
Maybe. His dad was trying to be better.
Well, and again, yeah. And so that I felt very unsatisfied by that. I wanted him to have a confrontation with his dad, and for his dad to be like, oh, yeah, okay, well, can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I can see that. But also, there's the realism of it's not just better and they don't know how to handle that situation just because they know how to beat people to death with a phone.
I guess. I did think like, oh, this part is real, where the alcoholic dad shows up and is all like, I'm so sorry. I love you so much.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I was like, till the next time you get a bottle in your hand.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I wanted more from that piece of it.
Yeah, understandably. I mean, there was just so many things like that were just flawed in the story.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm sure the movie we watch next week will have no flaws. It will be perfection. Mwah.
Mwah. Ciao, everybody.
Okay, bye.
The record button worked successfully without crashing the software.